All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is the farm business planning session. We have done this session from the start of the goat camps, the conception of this deal. It's one of those sessions that people, you know, when they first get into it, I know what you're thinking. My wife was just like y'all. When she went through college and she got to ag econ classes, she hated every minute of it. Really doesn't look forward to it. But a lot of people, they just, you know, they're not real excited about this until they figure out that this is not rocket science, but it is pretty important stuff, because the important thing about your operation, and I always tell people this, is you have to decide what your operation is. Is it a hobby? And we're not going to air this out to the IRS, but is this a hobby? I mean, are we doing this for something other than money? Case in point, I used to work with I worked with this one producer, and we were working some numbers out and stuff, and I basically proved to him he could sell his tractors and he could make more money, because he was cutting and baling his own hay. And he says, "You don't understand, that tractor keeps me married." Okay, because that was his stress relief. It really was. There's a lot of producers that enjoy the thought of working with animals or working with crops, and it's more of an intrinsical value more than it is a dollar value. And I cannot put a dollar value on what it you know, that feeling of walking through your herd of animals that, you know, me and my wife do on a regular basis, because that's something that actually, you know, brings, you know, some value to your operation, but it's not money. So you've got to decide, are you doing this kind of for pleasure, or are you doing this as a business? Now you come to me, I'm the business guy, okay? That's what you consider. I'm gonna focus on this. I'm gonna strictly approach this from a business standpoint. And what every business in America, whether we sell goats or whether we sell whizzy zigs or whatever, widgets, yeah, that's the word for it, widgets, it doesn't matter, whatever. Walmart has went through the same steps, maybe on a bigger scale, but they go through the same steps, your local stores and stuff. So we're going to approach this from a business standpoint, profit motive, okay? So now, with that said, there's little things that you need to work through when you do this, and like I said, these are planning 101 steps. This is things you should do before you buy the first goat. Now, if y'all already have goats, and you probably didn't do this begin, it's never too late to try. It's okay. First of all, why do we plan? And I always talk about planning from a standpoint, it's our roadmap. Okay? We know where we are today. We know where our operation is. We know what we're doing. We know we should have an idea of where we want to be in the future. Okay? We all have that idea. Now, the big question is how do we get from point A to point B? Well, when I was in school, they always taught me the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, right? Okay? Now, you're involved in production agriculture. There is no such thing as a straight line in production agriculture. Okay? And what our plan does, or our roadmap, is it helps us get from point A to point B. Some of y'all came from long distances, right? Some of you might have flown, but some of you drove. How did you know you was getting close to Ada? Today we don't use maps. I mean, my kids wouldn't know what a map is to save their life. They know what a GPS unit is. But if you used a map, sit there, you know, that's how you got from where you're at to where to Ada, Oklahoma. And as you went through certain towns, you knew you were getting closer. Plans work the same way. We know where we're at. We've got this plan on how to get there. And as we reach goals in our plan, we know we're making it on our way. So we come to, plans help us, we hit an obstacle, which you will hit. Okay? I've never seen a perfect farming operation yet that didn't hit an obstacle. You could choose either way. So if you don't have a plan, sometimes you go the wrong direction. Otherwise, we can make the right choice. Maybe we get to a choice where we have to make. In the goat business, especially if any of y'all are going to, even commercial guys, sometimes you're going to have to choose between $2. Two bloodlines, some different direction. Which way do you go? Well, if you don't know which direction you need to head in, you don't have that plan, you might get there. Both decisions may bring you to the same point. One just may take you a little longer to get there. So a plan helps us make the right choice. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. It doesn't always help us make the right choice, but it gives us some information. Again, I always refer to, a roadmap of success. As we get closer to our destination, when we hit our goals, we know we're on the right track. Okay, and we're going to use goals in our roadmap here. So this is why we try to plan. We're going to talk today about the business plan. Okay, and the business plan is kind of 6 parts up here. and we're going to talk in each one of them in pretty big detail. The mission statement, goals, key assumptions that we're going to have to make. Every plan has an assumption. And I know I've taught my boys what assume means. If you don't believe me, ask them tomorrow, and they'll turn red-faced when they have to get to that one word. But but we have to make assumptions, because none of y'all in this room, and even me included, I cannot look in my crystal ball and tell you what your goats are going to bring. I have to assume at one point in time. I have to assume that you're going to be able to sell your goats. Okay? So, I mean, we have to make assumptions. Organizational management is... Everybody kind of glosses over the management part of it, but that's kind of important. We'll go into detail. The marketing plan we've already discussed. We discussed that for an hour yesterday afternoon. We're not going to get into any bigger detail. But the thing that I spend the greatest deal of time on, as far as my job and stuff, is the financial part, running the numbers. Okay, and we'll talk about what it goes into doing a financial plan. Let's talk about mission statement and goals here. Mission statement, basically, it's kind of a statement that you want to make that kind of lets people know, if I didn't know anything about your operation and I read your mission statement, it would let me know what your operation is about. It's kind of how you want people to think. Why does it exist? Okay, it might even have, a few goals listed in there. I used to work with a producer out in Tennessee, and said, now he was a cattle producer, but he was my mailman. He come by my office every day. He took his break at my office. So me and him got a pretty good relationship worked out. And he always said, it's funny, his mission statement was pretty simple. He wanted to be known as the best supplier of commercial Angus bulls in that county and all the counties that surrounded him. Okay, he only had 35 head of cattle, so I mean, he wasn't a huge, Angus breeder. Could recite the Angus Journal backwards and forwards. Maybe the reason why he wasn't married. But anyway, he said Kent was a good, and before in the 10 years that I worked there, and he not only became the best Angus bull provider for commercial cattlemen. He wasn't trying to sell the high dollar bulls to the purebred breeders. He's trying to sell the commercial guy. He not only in that county, he was known that county and probably 3/4 of the state of Tennessee. Which, if anybody looked at the map, it's not very tall, but it is very wide. Okay, he raised some really good cattle. But his mission statement was really short and concise. If you look at OSU's mission statement, if you ever have insomnia, take it out and read it. You'll put you to sleep real quick. It's real thick, you doesn't have to be that long and drawn out, but you really have to put some emphasis or some thought into your mission statement, and it doesn't take you very long to come up with that. Once you get kind of your mission statement, then we get to the goals part of it. And I like the goals, again, it lets you know how you're making progress, and also too, you got to make sure that the goals are both not only short-term but long-term goals. A lot of times people focus on the short-term, 6 months, a year. Let's think 5 years from now, okay? Let's think 10 years from now, okay? So we look at that. Also, people almost want to focus strictly on monetary goals. We can do non-monetary. Don't tie everything to a dollar figure. That's real hard for me to do, but you need to do it, okay? It's something that... Now, the one thing that I really like goals for is that we use them to help anticipate problems that we might have. Okay, and the only way I can explain this that to me makes sense is use me an example. When I was living in Tennessee, I told people my goal was I wanted to retire with 100 head of cattle. From the Extension Service, I wanted to retire and have a herd of 100 head. Okay? Now, I own 15 acres. Okay? And so, do we see a problem there? Okay? Okay. So, that's how, people, I'm not saying, don't be short-sighted. Don't be afraid to put those lofty goals up there. But it was evident to me and anybody I told the story to that I was going to have to do some work towards, doing something different to where I could reach that goal. And I was working towards it. My neighbor, a nice elderly gentleman who had no children, I was trying to get adopted. It didn't work out, so I moved back home. No. So no, that's the kind of things goals can be used for. Now, when you talk about goals, they need to be SMART. SMART's an acronym that somebody came up with a long time ago. This means that they need to be specific. If you put a goal out there that's really vague, non-descriptive, how do you know when you make it? You need to put a goal that's real specific. That way you know you've reached it. Okay? Measurable, again, specific and measurable. to say that, I can't even really think of a really off the top, just a real vague one, but when you come up with goals that are just really not measurable, again, you can't know if you ever made it. Action oriented is another thing. So people always want to say, hey, I want to sell the highest goat, or a goat for $200, or let's say $100. Back when I was selling goats for 90 cents a pound, I would have loved to sell a $100 goat. Well, I've sold them at the market, $100. Did I do anything to change that? Is it because of me? I'd like to think so, but no, it's because the market has changed and we actually get $2 a pound instead of 90 cents a pound. Wasn't nothing that I did. So a lot of times people claim that they made goals, but they didn't do nothing to actually meet that goals. So when you set a goal, make it something that you would do to reach it, not that the market conditions or something else would cause you to reach it. Also to be reasonable. I say it's not hard. Lofty goals are fine, but let's not. One goal, I'd like to, walk on the moon. That's their old saying. I'd like to walk on the moon. I'm going to walk on the moon one day. Just don't know when. Okay. So got to be reasonable. Got to be obtainable. But like I say, sometimes people get too scared and don't make them lofty enough. And then we have to have a time frame. Time frame for me is the biggest point contention to me, because I'm here to tell you, any one of y'all here can ask me to do anything. And I'll do it for you. And if you tell me, and if I ask you, when do you want this done? Okay, and you say, just whenever. Okay, whenever is, in my mind, is just whenever. Someday, you probably never get it, because I'm not going to start working on your problem until about 2 days before the time frame that you gave me. I procrastinate really bad. That's my one vice in life. Don't talk to my wife. That's my one vice. But time frame, you need to set a time frame, because if you can't make it in a certain time, that also lets you know that you're maybe not making much progress, and therefore you need to maybe reevaluate some of your planning. Key planning assumptions. Again, you come into my office, we have to assume certain things. One, first we have to figure out what is available land. As y'all all realize now, if you have goats, you got to have fence. You'd be amazed the number of folks I have walk into my office say, hey, I want to raise goats. I'm like, yeah, all right, great. And I said, let's talk about, I've got 40 acres, I've got this. I said, what's your fencing look like? He said, 6 strands of barbed wire. I said, you have no fence. Not for a goat. So, but see, up until that point in time, I was assuming he had fences and he had checked into this. But fencing's important. Capital. Goats used to be a relatively cheap enterprise to roll into. My dad, who y'all will meet tomorrow at the farm, and I'll say sorry for him now, but he got in the goat business in the early 90s. He talks about buying $5 goats. It didn't matter to him if he brought $5 and brought them home when they died. He wasn't out a whole lot of money. Okay? Different story now. People still come to our farm still looking for that $50 goat. They just do. They roll out and they say, hey, and they just draw drops when I start, talking about prices. But then I said, do you realize what you can sell them for? Well, no, they haven't been in the market here lately. So, capital, buying, and it's not just the goats. We're talking about fencing. If anybody's priced fencing here lately, that's not a cheap endeavor in itself, especially goat fence. Why? Because there's a whole lot of wire in that that mile of fence. So the one thing that we don't talk about in this goat camp, and that you're going to need to know, and you'll see it tomorrow, housing for goats. Goats do not like to be out in the weather. We can't house them in the trees. Just can't do it. They don't do very well. There's other troughs. Feed troughs. Last time I checked, Tractor Supply does not give you a feed trough. I don't care how much feed you buy, or a water trough. And so everything costs money, and it all adds up. And then the other thing, what's available is your management abilities. Of course, y'all are trying to improve your management abilities today and over the next 3 days by coming to this class. But sometimes we have to assume, when you come and talk to me about stuff, I have to assume that you understand what we're talking about, and we can reach to that point. The other thing is marketing channels. Again, I talked about it yesterday in the marketing plan. Don't ever assume that you can sell something, but you need to kind of do some research and figure out what channels you have, where are the best sales and stuff. And then your borrowing ability. A few years ago, you couldn't borrow a dime on a goat. Banks would laugh at you. That's come a little different change. So we can borrow some money. They don't laugh near as hard, but they still will loan you the money just a little bit. So There's a couple of things on organizational management. The first thing that most people fail to do a good job on is just how they're going to manage the type of operation they're going to have. We have basically 5 choices we can choose from. 95% of you are going to choose that sole proprietorship, basically a one owner. Fill out the Schedule F on the tax schedules and go with that. Also, the other one that maybe the other 4.5% of you might do is a general partnership. And believe it or not, when a husband and wife go into a farming team, that's considered a general partnership by IRS rules. You didn't know that. So they're supposed to actually fill the partnership form out. Nobody does, but it's the way you read the rules. Limited partnership, if you can talk your neighbor or in my case, my stepsister, into giving you money, and I told her she'd give me $5,000, she could be a partner in the goat operation, okay? And limited partnerships are basically an investor who gives you money, and they can come out and do work, but they're not involved in the day-to-day operation of the farms. The other 3 that are listed up here, the bottom 2 corporations, C and S. Not very many of you are going to even talk about that. That was the thing back in the 80s that we used, and it's a way to kind of try to limit your liability. If something bad goes wrong, they can't come after grandma's dishes. Okay. C Corp, though it's a corporation, it actually gets taxed at twice the level as what any other business entity does, because it taxed at the corporate rate, then the profits pass through, and it's taxed again at the individual's rate. So it gets taxed twice. S Corp is a little different. The profits pass all the way through. You get only taxed once. But there's liability or limited ways you can set an S corporation up. The new kid on the block, and I used to say new kid, 10 years ago it was new, and it's not so new anymore, is LLC. You'll probably see, these companies that say blah, 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 LLC. It's a limited liability corporation. It basically works like a partnership, but it's set up such that if something happens, something bad happens, the only assets that can be seized are the assets within that company, that LLC. So as a person, they can't come to you and seize your own personal property. It takes some setup. Don't believe what the radio commercials say. I'm not going to mention any places' names, but they say you can set them up online, for a little bit of money. You do need to get lawyers involved in all 3 of those things. And there are certain rules and regulations on how to run these types of organizations. And if you ever get into a snafu and get called on that, the courts are going to look at it, and basically if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck. So if you act like a general partnership or a sole proprietorship, and you talk like a sole proprietorship, no matter what you call yourself, LLC or nothing, you're sole proprietorship. So you have to follow the rules in that. The marketing plan we've already talked about. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time. The what, when, and the what, where, and when. Again, I spent an hour yesterday. Y'all don't need a refresh, do you? You ready to go? Okay. Initial financial requirements. The initial capital needs. This is what we talked about before: land, fences, breeding animals. That's usually people think of. Housing for goats is one nobody thinks of. A barn. Do you need a barn? Well, I told my wife we did. Okay. So, and you'll see tomorrow, I've almost got it taken back over for where she put all her stuff in it. So, but no, a barn. You may or may not need one. Truck and trailer. Now, it's a little different from the cattle business, because in goats, we can actually build a small little box in the back of our truck, and we can just go to town. But you still have to have that truck in that box. Okay, your neighbor or your son-in-law, your brother-in-law is only going to let you borrow your trucks. So many times, you clean the goat poop out of it before he's going, you need to get your own, okay? So, I mean, these are all things that we think of. And it all adds up. It doesn't take very long to get added up pretty quick. That $150 or $200 doe goat all of a sudden becomes $400, $500, $600 pretty dang quick, okay? So we got to think of all this. How much will it all cost? How much money do I have to spend, and how much do I have to borrow? And if I have to borrow, how much can I borrow? Okay? Enterprise analysis. Fancy word for saying budget. But see, it's amazing to me that when I start talking about economics, people get kind of that deer in the headlight looks. But all we're talking about is simple math and running budgets. And budgets is not a cool word either, but it's not as scary as economic or enterprise analysis. Simply said, a goat budget is it's income minus our cash expenses. Okay, our cash expenses are real simple. It is the money that we spend on the items that we use up in 1 year's time period. Example, the easiest one to think of in the world is feed. Hay, feed. Those are the two easiest ones. Vet medicines that we buy. Although we might buy that bottle and it may stay in our cabinet for a year and a half, we're typically going to charge that off that first year, that first bottle. So we got that. Needles, any type of supplies that we use in a year. That's what we typically, when we do a budget, we'll match, get the income that's coming in, we'll subtract out the cash expenses. This is where most producers feel that they stop, and if it's a positive number, we've made a profit. And you have made a cash profit. But what you have to incur or have to figure out from a business standpoint is your fixed expenses. Okay? So have you ever heard of dealers say, our organizations talk about overhead stuff? This is the best way to describe it. Overhead, fixed expenses. These are the expenses that we spend money on, but it takes us more than a year to use that item up. Easiest example to think of is that breeding doe that you buy. She's got a useful life of 5 years. Let's just throw 5 years out there. If you pay $500 for her, she needs to make you $100 a year to pay for herself. Does that make sense? Okay, so we might cover our cash expenses and make a profit, but if we don't cover our fixed expenses and cover that overhead, what happens is when we go to replace that breeding female and she hadn't covered her expenses, when we buy the replacement, the money that we buy that replacement for comes out of some other pocket. Typically, with us, if we're part-time farmers, it's typically that off-farm job, that's paying for it. So those are the three things that we think about. A risk analysis, just a fancy way of looking at, how to figure out what happens if this happens versus this happens. Kind of look at a what-if type scenario. And then the one thing I like to look at, and what I do on my farm, kind of personally, is I figure out what it costs me to raise each animal. That way, when I price animals off the farm to you, I price it at least. I know I'm pricing above my cost. At least that's my goal anyway. Because if I don't know what my break-even is, sorry, I'm not a very good English person either. If I don't know what my break-even is, and you come out and I price them to you for $150 and it's taking me $200, how long can I stay in business doing that? Not very long unless I win the lottery. Okay, and I'm going to win the lottery one of these days when I buy the ticket. Okay.
How many goats do you have now?
On our operation, we're up to. My wife and myself and my kids are up to about 30, and my dad's probably got about the same number. We were up to 100 at one point in time. We've backed off that number quite a bit. An example of a budget here. I just kind of showed. Don't get too upset or too excited about the numbers. This budget's probably 3 or 4 years old, and I leave it this numbers just because I want you to focus on just not the numbers, but the process in itself. Okay, how we think about this. Wether kids. Okay, we sell wether kids. We sell doe kids. On my example, on my farm, I've got I probably have show kids, replacement females. Kind of line by line. We sell cull-aged does because every year I'm culling some does out that don't make the grade, don't do what they're supposed to do. So that's income coming to us. And then our cull replacement doe kids, because not every doe kid that I keep stays on the place. I may keep 10 and only actually breed 5, 6, or 7. Because once they get up to a certain age, if they're not again what I think they need to be, why feed them any longer? So I sell them to somebody else or take them to town. So you can kind of see when we kind of adds this all up. In this little example, I've got $5,500, $5,600 in sales. I like to divide it on a per doe basis. Why that? Because that kind of breaks it down on a per animal basis, helps me figure up the break-evens a little bit. And so in this little example, I'm bringing in roughly $112 a goat. Okay, so that tells me real quick I have to keep my expenses under $112 per goat to be profitable. Okay, now on expenses, I'm going to throw this up there. You don't have to be this specific on when you talk about when you break out the feed, but here I've done it. I've got feed for my does, feed for my bucks, my replacement does. Here's something that most goat producers forget about. That guardian animal that you're putting out there does not live for free. Okay, and then people who come to this, they go, "How do you feed yours for $200?" Well, ours almost starve to death sometimes, but no, I feed them pretty cheap. But that's a cost, And in this little example, it's $4 a goat. It could be as high as $10 a goat. Depending on what you're going to feed. Okay, so that's some salt, minerals. You look at that. Other costs up here: vet vet herd health. You would hope that that number would be pretty low per goat, and all it takes is one trip to vet to blow this budget out of the water, right? But most of y'all will learn that as you do this, you'll get to go where you do most of the vet work on your own. When we pull into the vet's driveway, the vet's look on her face is, oh no, because if y'all haven't been able to solve it, that means it's a really tough one for me. And so, you'll learn that over time as well. Fuel and repairs. Fuel, not so much a big cost in this, but I'm here to tell you, goats can tear up a rubber hammer. Okay, and you'll be fixing stuff. And you think, well, I won't fix that much. Well, all it takes is about one fence getting tore out or tore down, and you'll figure it out pretty quick. Marketing, even when we sell animals, it's not for free. Even when I sell off the farm, I really have a cost involved because I have a website that I have to maintain. Okay, it's not cheap, it's not free. I have to maintain it. So, I still have marketing costs, but most people, if you're in the commercial business, could be commissions. I got an average in here, $6 a goat. Could be a little higher depending on what kind of marketing channels you use. Annual operating capital. This is just a fee that I charge. It would be a real fee if I had to borrow all this money up front and then pay it back when I sell the goats or sell the kids. You can call it an opportunity cost if you want to, but it basically, if you total all kind of up, it's $182. It's what the interest charge would be, or about $3.64. Kind of put it, say return on your investment if you want to, but some kind of charge in there. I don't put any labor in my budgets because I work for free. But now, a business operation, if you're going to do this for a job, you would want to put in a salary or some type of labor cost in there because you want to cover your salary. What I'm doing now, the way I've done this budget, is whatever I have left over is paying that's what I get for my salary, okay? So, or my kid's salary or whoever thinks deserves it. So anyway, we look at this and you can see this returns above operating cost. Basically it says here that I've made a profit of about $35 a goat, okay? Cool, so this is where most people would stop and say, oh, let's go to the bank and let's quit this. But again, we got to think of the fixed cost. If we've had to borrow those goats, we have the interest money and charge it. That depreciation, that's the cost of owning those animals over time. If you happen to live into a county or a state that charges that personal property taxes, some of us, when we tell the court clerks exactly what we have on the place, we pay a little bit of taxes and insurance on the goat, so it comes up to about $30 a goat. So now you figure it all up, and I made about $5 a goat. Now this is where you all go, oh, because you're going, I'm not saying, again, don't get hung up in the numbers. I want you to think about the process of the numbers. Okay, that's the whole idea. But if you can just get the process down, that's what we want to focus on. Okay, now I talk about break-even analysis, just the way to kind of look at it. Break-even prices to cover our operating expenses. And the way that we kind of suggest to do it is we take our operating expenses, we subtract out our call income, because our call income is it's really not figured into our break-even. We want to figure break-even on a per-kid basis, okay? So we subtract that call income out, and then we divide it by the pounds produced. Now you can either do pounds produced or you can do number of head, okay? If we're doing commercial, we hope that we're selling dollars, by the pound. That's what we typically sell by. And so in our little example, to cover our cash expenses, we would roughly need 70 cents a pound, which in today's market, that's very easy to get, okay? So that leads me to believe that even on my example, we can cover our cash expenses really easy. To cover all our expenses, we take the total expenses, which again, we subtract out the coal income, divide it by the pounds produced, and it comes out to about $1.04. Okay? Now, that leads you to believe, I did this budget, like I said, 3 years ago, so you can see the prices that I used weren't very good. So if we can't, in today's market, if I don't average better than $1, I'm hoping to get $1.50. But you can kind of see how this works out. On my operation, I've got it figured out because so many goats are going to make show goats, so many goats are going to make replacements, so many goats are going to the market. I have this much per goat, so I kind of figure out how much I basically figure out how much I have to sell, because I'm pretty sure what I'm going to sell the market animals for, pretty sure I'm going to sell what the replacement's for, so I have to figure out, the show animals to cover all the other costs. Everything that makes sense to everybody? See, it's not hard, not easy. Not hard, not easy. It's not hard. It's all it is math, okay? All right. Any questions so far? Yes, sir.
You said that at one time you were up to 100 head of does, I assume, and you're now down in the range of 30. Obviously, you figured out a way to make profit on fewer heads, as opposed to maybe you're making the same profit on fewer head that you made with the larger number. What's the basis of that decision, and how did you work all of that out?
Okay, the 100 goats was between me and my dad together. So I mean, now we're down to about 60.
Okay.
So what the biggest is, we were overstocked to begin with. Back when feed was cheaper, we could afford to feed the animals. Hay was cheaper. We could afford to feed them more. We did feed them more. Even the high premium feed that we feed was cheaper. As feed prices went up, as the drought hit us 2 years in a row, we figured out it is, we can actually put less money in and make similar money. Maybe not the total dollars that we were making with 100 head, but we're actually making probably the total profit because we're not spending as much. Cost got to the point to where we had to reduce the herd. That's just where it got to. So that and availability, it'll probably sneak back up a little bit. Availability of labor was an issue with 100 head. My boys at the time were 10 and under. The 13-year-old and 11-year-old are getting to where they're bigger than I am, so they can do a lion's share of the work. For my dad, they don't do it for me, but they'll walk across and do it for Papa.
Did you find a better market or a better marketing opportunity?
Well, prices have gone up. Okay, and so as prices go up, we increase our prices too. We base a lot of our show goat prices on current market prices, believe it or not, because we're not trying to make a killing on it. I'd love to make a killing on it, but we just don't try. We base it.
And when you say show goat, you're talking mostly about market goats, right?
When I say show goats, 4-H and FFA kids coming out and buying projects from us, and it could either be wethers or does. So.
What do those goats normally sell for?
Oh, there's no normal in show goats. there's no normal. It's all over the board from $300 to $3,000. I don't sell in that $3,000 range. You got to know your clientele too. So.
Wished you could, huh?
Yeah, well, I honestly, to tell you the truth, I couldn't look a kid in the eye and tell him $3,000 for a goat. I'd feel really bad.